Hi friends, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Here's what we're discussing today.
For the record, can you start by stating your name, please?
Oh, sure, yeah, you can post it. Let's see what it was like.
Hi, can
Hi.
you start by stating your name?
It's Jennifer Crumbley.
And Mrs. Crumbley, you and I have been working together since December of 2021, correct?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that over these last 26 months, we've discussed whether or not you intended to testify a number of times?
We have.
Do you want to testify in your case?
Yes.
Do you understand that if you did not testify, this judge, this court, would give the jury instructions that it cannot be held against you?
Yes.
Do you understand that after I question you, the prosecution is going to be able to cross-examine you?
Yes.
And do you understand they're going to be able to cross-examine you about all of the evidence that's been admitted in the case, including all of your text messages or your Facebook messages to your husband, all of those messages with Mr. Maloche, all the evidence in the case,
Yes,
correct?
I do.
They get full reign on cross-examination. We've gone over that, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you have any questions for myself or for Judge Matthews about testifying?
No, I don't.
Are you doing this because anyone has threatened you or coerced you into testifying?
No.
Is this your choice?
Yes.
Is it voluntary, freely made by you?
Yes.
So yesterday, Jennifer Crumbley took the stand to testify in her own defense. Apparently, her lawyer did not watch the Alex Murdaugh trial.
Ms. Ward, I'm just trying to answer your question, and so I'm not trying to be difficult.
Or maybe she failed to see the Jodi Arias trial.
Issue with you with answering the questions as they're posed?
Sometimes, but I'm trying to answer them the best I can.
So is it an attitude issue with you then?
Or maybe she's followed some of these other trials where people who thought they could talk their way out of a mess just managed to talk their way into it. Anyone who watched the Alex Murdaugh trial knows that the direct examination went flawlessly. And yeah, that was probably because it had been practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced for probably 3 weeks prior to going into that courtroom. And you get the feeling after watching the testimony yesterday that it had been practiced too. Let's take a little bit of a listen here.
You have a son.
Yes.
The jury's heard a lot about your son. Okay? I want to talk about your son prior to November 30th, okay?
Okay.
Tell the jury how old he was at that time.
He was 15 years old.
And give the jury an idea about what kinds of things he was into, what his hobbies included.
Oh, he was really into bowling. He was actually really good at it. He was into metal detecting. What
do you mean by metal detecting?
We have a metal detector, so we would go to the beach, or we went to Florida, out by the ocean, or the neighbor's yard. They weren't there anymore, so we go in the neighbor's yard and see if he could find old coins or cans or whatever he would find. But he really liked that. He was into his BB guns and target practice. We had a half-acre of land in the village of Oxford that went straight back. So in the backyard, we set up little targets that we got from Amazon that you can just kind of shoot down, like little whatever. He was into his video games. He did soccer from age 3 until 9th grade.
See, I know my son. I know what he was into. I was paying attention. I was concentrating on my son. That was the message of this part of the testimony. Yesterday, as I'm putting out videos and I go and I check the mail, I walk about, it's probably a quarter of a mile down to our collective post office and pick up the mail. And one of the things that came in the mail yesterday was this little litigation quote calendar from Trial Guides. And Trial Guides is kind of a neat place. They do a lot of work with trial lawyers, and indeed I had an opportunity several years ago to do some work with them on a treatise on cross-examination. And so I wrote a large portion of that, and it got published, and ever since then they have been nice to me, and around the holidays they send me something like that. I think that may have gotten stuck in another person's mailbox and it only recently arrived here. So I've missed a whole month of the quotes, but it's not because of anything they did. It's because our postal people here can't read addresses, I guess. I don't know. One of the things that I found really interesting when I opened it up this morning and took a look at it was the quote for today. And it's from a book called The Elements of Trial by Rick Friedman and Bill Cummings. And here's what it says. In the end, being an emotionally healthy and effective trial lawyer requires embracing the paradox of caring, believing, and detachment. So caring about your client, believing in your client, believing that you can do something positive for your client, and yet being detached from the outcome because you don't control the outcome. You do the best you can with the tools that you have and you wait the result in peace. But some people never learn that lesson. And hey, I'd be the first to admit that as a young lawyer, I took everything personally. You said something bad about my client, it made me angry. Well, that's a really bad way to practice law. And fortunately, I had some mentors who slapped me upside the head and said, you can't do that. What are you doing? This isn't right. This isn't you in your normal life. That's not how you behave, is it? Well, no. If the guy at McDonald's gets your orders wrong, you don't go, take a baseball bat to him, do you? No, you don't. So hopefully, at some point in time, every lawyer learns that, you can't take everything personally. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you emotionally. And I think that if you let it affect you emotionally, it always impacts your performance. Several years ago, I was reading a book on negotiation. And one of the things that it said was, when you negotiate, you care, but not too much. Because emotional involvement in anything dims your objectivity. It's one of the reasons why we don't have dads represent daughters in court, and one of the reasons why we don't have husbands represent wives in court, because the potential for a lack of objectivity is very strong in those situations. But sometimes, every now and then, emotion is your friend.
In some of the messages the prosecution admitted, you say that you failed as a parent. Are you a failure as a parent?
I don't think I'm a failure as a parent, but at that time, I guess I felt bad that Ethan was sad at those things, and I guess I don't know, I just felt like I failed somewhere. I don't really know how to describe it. It's that point in time, I just kind of felt like somewhere I failed.
Do you believe there was anything, do you believe that you knew or had reason to know your son was a danger to anyone else?
No. As a parent, you spend your whole life trying to protect your child from other dangers. You never would think you have to protect your child from harming somebody else.
Now, there's strategy here in putting Ms. Crumbley on. First of all, you want to make sure people realize she's human. And of course, when you make sure people realize she's human, you make sure they realize she's fallible. So they discussed very directly the ways in which she had failed. Probably not in terms of failure, but illustrating that, as I believe the Reagan administration once said, mistakes were made. It's always interesting when people phrase things in the passive voice. Instead of saying, I screwed up, they say, mistakes were made. But at any rate, the whole purpose of the direct exam, at least that part of the direct exam, was to borrow a line from a Glenn Campbell song to show that she had the dreams of the everyday housewife. She had a husband, she had a son, she had a paramour, and she was living her life. She was living large, doing fine. And then everything fell apart. In fact, this is what she said about that.
You've lost everything.
We did.
Now, it's probably true that she has lost everything. They've probably lost their home. They have probably lost their job. Well, I know they've lost their jobs. They've been in jail for 2 years. As a result of that, they don't have a lot of assets. If you take a look at her booking photograph, where she just looks madder than a wet hen, what you see is a somewhat attractive woman in her, I guess, early 40s, who is just really ticked off that she's been arrested. And in that case, in that photo, it's clear that she had makeup on. She'd had her hair done, I guess, at one point. It didn't look like it was perfect when she had her picture taken, but she'd had her hair done. And all of that. Well, now, if you look at her in this trial, they're not putting any makeup on her. There is a huge contrast from her pre-jail photos. Some of the photos that they've shown, for example, where she was hugging one of her, I don't know whether it was her paramour or one of her work buddies, but she looked like a reasonably attractive female in her 40s. That's, obviously the look that she wanted to have. Now, after sitting on her behind in jail for 2 years, where the diet is carbs and fat and a lack of exercise, she has, I would say, ballooned out a little bit, and they are purposely dressing her in floppy clothing that looks like it was designed to fit Jabba the Hutt. And that's not necessarily to conceal the fact that she's gained weight, because I think they want to emphasize that she is not the person that she was in that booking photograph. But they're making a point that this has been a very hard thing on her. Several years ago, my wife and I went to Norwich, Vermont. I had been asked by the people at Dartmouth University and their respiratory care program up there to come and talk about the risks of malpractice, the fact that many of their respiratory therapists were now working under protocols, and whether or not that had risks for them. So they had reserved a room for us at the Norwich Inn, and the Norwich Inn had sort of an interesting reputation. Apparently, one of the rooms was haunted. So we were kind of looking forward to staying at the Norwich Inn, and we flew into, I forget whether it was the capital of Vermont or whether it was some other place, but we flew in and we drove up to Norwich. And this was before I had a cell phone that had a map on it, and it was before I had my Garmin to take me everywhere. And so I was working off of a set of directions that I had printed out from AAA. I was looking for the Norwich Inn. I drove all over Norwich, Vermont. I am convinced I went down every street looking for this silly place called the Norwich Inn. And finally, after having been goaded into it by a wife who was tired of seeing the scenic tour of Norwich, Vermont at 9 p.m. when you couldn't see a blinking thing, I stopped at this little store to ask for directions. So I stopped at the store and I went in, and my wife is sitting there in the car, and she looks over to the right, and there's a sign that says Norwich Inn. And she just couldn't help but bust out laughing. So I go into the store and I'm like, "Can you tell me where the Norwich Inn is?" And the guy looks at me like, "Have you been drinking?" And I said, I've been all over this town. I can't find the Norwich Inn. And he went, I said, "You mean it's that way?" He said, "I mean it's next door." Oh, thank you. I walked out, and sure enough, they hadn't moved it when I went inside, and there it was. And I felt really, really stupid. But the point of this story is to make it clear that everybody sometimes misses the signs. And I think, in large part, she missed the signs. And I think that as a result, a tragedy happened. It was a preventable tragedy, and all it required to prevent that tragedy was a lock. and a gun safe. That's what was required, and they didn't do that. But the whole point of putting her on the stand is to make you be able to see her as this fallible sort of girl next door. There are some huge risks to that because now she's going to be subject to cross-examination. And we all remember what happened to Alex Murdaugh when he got up on cross-examination, and he was a lawyer. He knew how to answer questions. He knew what to say. He knew how to dodge questions. I don't know if Jennifer Crumbley is bright enough to be able to do that. I don't know if she has been schooled in how to respond to cross-examination. But I'll tell you this much, I will not miss this cross-examination for love nor money. This is something I'm going to watch and hopefully be able to bring a video to you. If not tomorrow, maybe next week. And the reason I point out that cross-examination is her chief risk, it is dangerous to try to get too much sympathy. Late in the day yesterday, there was what appeared to be a blunder by her attorney. She asked if she did not feel to be like she was the victim in all of this. Well, you can imagine that both the jury and all of those real victims who were sitting in the courtroom, their antennas went to full attention and they focused on that woman and they watched her affect as she said this.
Over the last 26 months, has this been stressful for you?
It's been very stressful. Yes,
Have you had a range of emotions?
I've had a lot of emotions.
Do you believe you are the victim here?
I don't want to say that I'm a victim because I do not want to disrespect those families that truly are the victims on this, but we did lose a lot.
Shortly after that, the direct exam stopped, trial quit for the day, and the jury got to take that answer home and think about it. And that was the purpose of waiting to put her on at the end of the day. And that was the purpose of being able to conduct the examination, which was much lengthier than it needed to be, because the idea was they did not want to let any cross-examination happen yesterday, so the jury would have a full 8 or 10 hours to think about and process that testimony. Well, now it's time to pay the piper, and there's going to be some cross-examination. We'll have to see what happens. But here's what I want to point out. What appeared to be a blunder may have been a masterstroke, because that answer was a really good answer. No, I'm not the victim. The real victims are in the courtroom here. But I have lost everything. And I think that was an important point to make. That, as I said yesterday, she's never going to be able to hold her son again. She is never going to be able to talk to him except through plexiglass and on a phone. That's what her life with her son is going to be like from this point forward. My guess is, having admitted her affair, that her marriage is probably, if not on the rocks, it's probably over, and all of that. So there was a lot to unpack there, but here's the point. That answer has been scripted for weeks. The way she looked down, the way she appeared to think about the question, she didn't just blurt out her answer. She did it in a way that was stage managed. And that can very well work for her. But it's all going to depend on the cross-examination, which I can't wait to see. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Today you have an opportunity to do something nice for someone. For example, today my wife really likes the eggplant parmesan at the Olive Garden. Now, eggplant, I can take it or leave it. If you served it to me at your house, and if I came over for dinner and you served that, I would not say anything bad about it. I would eat it and I'd smile and I'd be happy about it, but it's not my favorite. I'm kind of a plain food kind of guy. As between that and chicken fried rice, I'd probably take chicken fried rice. But my wife loves that stuff. So we'll go to the Olive Garden. I'll have soup, salad, and breadsticks and eat a little chicken gnocchi, and my wife will have that, and she will be in hog heaven. It is really important, if you are in a relationship, to spend time together, to do it away from where you both work, and to sit down and take a time to really listen. I heard something profound yesterday that I am going to repeat back to you because I think it has a lot to offer for people. And that is this: we spend way too much time listening to ourselves. And you know what I mean, that whiny little voice inside that says, he cut me off. Man, that clerk was rude. Wow, this food is really cold. Those kinds of whiny little things that we tend to work into our victimhood instead of talking to ourselves. Cold food is still edible food. Maybe he didn't mean to be rude. Maybe he had burned toast for breakfast this morning. Who knows? There are all kinds of ways to turn a negative into a positive, but it begins with talking to yourself and putting yourself on the right path. You will enjoy life a lot more if you spend more time talking to yourself than you do listening to yourself. Like I said, that's what I've got for you today. Come on down and join me at the beach again next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.